Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. Today we continue our study of the second book of Kings, that is Malachim Bet. We are now about to read chapter 11, that is Perek Yud Aleph. And we have just, the last two chapters, we read of the murderous and bloodthirsty coup that Yehu perpetrated in order to take over the northern kingdom of Israel and kill out the family of Ahab, and thus end the reign of the family of Ahab. However, in this next chapter, what we're about to read today, we are going to focus on the southern kingdom, but we are going to find that Yehu's attempt at stamping out the house of Ahab actually led to a slight flickering of the house of Ahab, the house of Ahab, lighting up in the southern kingdom of Judah, of Yehuda. If you recall, the daughter of Izebel and Ahab, right, was Athaliah. She married into the royal family, and she was the mother of Ahaziah, who was the king of Yehuda, the king of Judah, who was a descendant of David, right? So Athaliah was now remaining in the southern kingdom. So when Yehu killed out the family of Ahab, he did not kill out the queen mother of Ahaziah. He did assassinate Ahaziah, as we read in chapter 9. Ahaziah himself, the king of Yehuda. And then when he met 42 of Ahaziah's descendants, right, of his family, or the family of Yehuda, he slaughtered them, leaving many potential heirs to the throne of Judah dead, right, in his bloodlust, which left an opening for Athaliah, which we're about to read about. So let's go. Athaliah aim Ahaziah. Athaliah, who was the mother of Ahaziah, the king who had just been assassinated in Judah, Ra'asa ki meis bana. She saw that her son had died. In other words, obviously, she found out what had happened in the northern kingdom. Immediately, what was her reaction? Vatokam vata'abed eis kol zera hamamlacha. She immediately slaughtered anyone that remained in the family of the Judahite kings, any descendant of David's family, anyone that could potentially be take over the throne of Yehuda, with her intention, of course, to rule herself. So this woman was following the footsteps of Yehu, who had killed out the family of Ahab. She went ahead and killed out the entire family of David's line, even her own children and her own descendants, as we shall see in a moment. Vatikach Yehosheva, who was Bas HaMelech Yoram, Yehosheva, who was the daughter of King Yehoram being the father of Ahaziah, right? So she took Achos Ahaziah, she was the sister of Ahaziah. She took Es Yoash ben Ahaziah, a young boy, a baby named Yoash, the son of Ahaziah, who was on the list of people to die from Athaliah. So that's her own grandson, right? She was going to kill her own grandson in order to get power for herself. But Yehosheva took him, Vatignovoso, and she stole him away, mitoch b'nei hamelech hamumasim, from among the descendants of the king who were about to be put to death. She managed to snatch this baby boy away. Also, he, the esmei nikto, and his nursemaid, bachadar hamitos, and hid him in the room of the beds, the bedchamber. So somehow she hid him in there. Vayastiru oso mipnei Athaliah v'lo humas, and they were able to hide him from Athaliah so that he was not put to death. Vayehi ita beis Adonai, and he stayed with her, presumably with Yehosheva and or with the nursemaid, in the house of God. So where he ended up staying, whether this was where it sounds like he was initially hidden in this room of Chadar Hamitos, this bedchamber, and then somehow he was squirreled off and hidden away in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. So he was hidden there in the temple for 6 shanim, for 6 years. Athaliah molechas al aretz, and Athaliah was then the queen over the land. So now we have a queen who is a descendant of Ahab, of the house of Ahab, sitting on the throne of Judah. And sitting on the throne of Judah, and such as a result of an extremely murderous rampage. So there's several things here, and that the murder of Yehu, the murderous trail that Yehu left behind, set up a situation that instead of killing out Ahab's descendants, he actually unintentionally enabled a descendant of Ahab to now take over the southern kingdom of Yehuda, which just another example of how, if you recall in our last podcast, how Yehu, although he thought himself being zealous for God, he ended up creating a situation where the very house he was trying to get rid of, he enabled them to continue on, because he didn't think. He was mishuga. He was crazed with his zealotry and anger, and thus he acted in such a way that wasn't thoughtful. It just wasn't smart. It wasn't right, and much worse than that, of course, it was horrific. Anyway, that set off another horrific campaign by this Athaliah, who is now the queen. Now, Yehosheva, the sister who hid Yoash, right, her nephew, this Yehosheva, we know from the book of Chronicles, is the wife of the high priest Yehoiada, who we're going to meet in a minute, right? So it makes sense that he was able to hide him in the temple as the high priest. He was able to hide him away. Tradition has it that this Chadar HaMitos, this bedchamber, is actually just above the Holy of Holies. Is a room above the Holy of Holies, and this is where they hid him, and it's a safe spot because even the queen wouldn't dare enter the Holy of Holies. So Uvashana Hashvias, and in the 7th year, so now Athaliah is ruling for 6 years. Sholach Yehoyada vayikach es sorei hameos. Yehoyada, the Kohen Gadol, right? He is the high priest. He sent for the heads of the hundreds, la kari v'laratzim, the kari, the Karites, ratzim, and the ratzim are those, the messengers, those that run or those that guard. The kari is referring to some sort of officer. So he got together all of the officers, all the leaders, by Aveo Samelov Beis Adonai, and he brought them to him in the house of God, Vayichros Lahem Bris, and he made an agreement with them. Vayashpa Osam Beis Adonai, and in the house of God, he made them all swear loyalty to this plan, which he's about to describe. Vayarosam Es Ben Hamelach, and he showed them, in other words, the king's son. In other words, he showed them that there is indeed. So it's interesting to think about what the 6 years were like when people actually thought that there was no one left from the house of David. You can just imagine what that felt like, that they thought that this house of David, which had been promised by God to be the eternal rulers of the Jewish people, that there was no one left. But now they all of a sudden found out that there is a king. There is a potential king. And he commanded them as follows. And you can tell this is a very well thought out plan in such a way as to bring about the end of Athaliah's reign and reestablish the Davidic monarchy. This Yehoiada thought this plan through quite well. This is what you should do. Right? 1/3 of you who are supposed to be here this week, because everyone was divided in groups, the Kohanim, the Leviim, the priests, the Levites, and the guards, and everyone of the Israelites, they were all divided in groups as to who takes turns, doing the guard and taking care of things, etc. So those that are coming that week, v'shomrei mishmeres beis hamelach, and those, right, should be in charge of guarding the royal palace. Vashlishish b'shar sur, and another third of those people that are coming this week should guard the sur gate. V'ashlishis b'shar acharotzim, and the other third should be at the other gate, behind the guards. And the purpose of this, ushmartem es mishmeres habayis masach, and you should guard the house from all around, completely everywhere, all around. So here, the reason for this is in order to make sure that what's going to take place within the Beis Hamikdash, what's going to take place within the temple, it will be guarded so that no potential supporters of Athaliah, whichever soldiers or whatever that might be on her side, won't be able to get into the temple because the guard will be in place. Now, this word masach is a difficult word to translate. I translated it from every side, but it also could be understood as masach. The Targum Yonasan translates it in such a way as be on guard, as be attentive, be on guard and attentive, from the same language as hesach hadas, right? With whatever, okay, but do not, which means, in other words, do not let your mind slip. But regardless, the intent is what we read. Ushtei hayados bachem kol yotzei hashabos, and the two groups of you who are leaving this week. In other words, you are not going to be working this week, right? V'shamru es mishmeres beis Adonai el hamelach, and you will guard the temple itself. So all those doorways from which the king's supporters can come will be guarded by the first group, and the second group will guard the temple itself. V'hikaftem, and the king himself. V'hikaftem al melech saviv. He's already calling him the king. And you will surround the melech completely. Ish v'chelav biado, each person with his weapons, right? V'haba el hashteros yumas, and anyone who tries to break through, presumably anyone who tries to break through, his or her intent would be to harm the king in support of Athaliah, the queen, right? The current queen, the usurping queen, right? Should be put to death. V'hiu es hamelech b'tzeisovo, and you need to be guarding the king when he comes and goes, no matter what. Vayasu sorei hameos u'chol asher tziva Yehoyada hakohen, and the people, in charge, the officers did exactly as Yehoyada had commanded. Vayikhu ishes anashav bo'ei hashabasim yosei hashabas vayavo el Yehoyada hakohen. And those that were on duty that week and those that were leaving duty that week, all of those people who were present, they came to Yehoyada in order to present themselves as loyal to Yehoyada and his coming plan. Vayitain hakohen, and the Kohen Yehoyada gave them the sarei hameos, to all the officers in charge of the hundreds, es hachanis v'es hashilatim, the spears and quivers, in other words, the weapons, asher lamelech David, that were owned and stored by the king David himself, asher beveis Adonai, which were kept in the temple storage. So this has symbolic meaning because he's giving them the very weapons that had been placed there by David himself in order to defend and reestablish the Davidic monarchy against the usurper who was not a legitimate Davidic queen. And giving them these weapons is a powerful gesture with which to defend the king that they're about to establish. And the guards stood, each with their weapons in their hand, mikesef habayis hayemonis ad kesef habayis hasmalis, from the northern end of the house to the southern end of the house, right? Literally it means the right and the left. Lamizbeach, on the altar side, v'labayis, and on the side where the holy part of the temple is, al hamelech saviv, all surrounding the king, so that he is in the temple and surrounded by all these men on all different sides of the temple. Vayotzi etz ben hamelech, and they took out the son of the king. At this time they call him the son of the king because he is about to be the king in a second. The actual king, vayitein alav es hanezer v'es ha'edus, and they placed upon him the crown, and the edus is the literally it means the testimony. So it's something which a symbol that gives him the symbol of kingdom. So it might have been, it can be interpreted as a staff with sometimes the insignia of the symbol of the kingdom. Traditionally, it's interpreted as the Torah which is also called the Eidus. The Torah is called the witness, which witnesses the covenant between the Jewish people and God. So it could have meant the Torah, but it's that. So they gave him the symbols of kingship, Vayamlichu also, and they appointed him as the king, Vayimshachuhu, and he was anointed, Vayaku Chaf, and everyone was clapping, Vayomer, and they said, Yechi Hamelach, may long live the king. So the ceremony is taking place. Vatishma Athaliah es kol haratzin ha'am, and Athaliah hears the sound of the guards calling out, Vatovo el ha'am beis Adonai. She comes out to the people to the temple. Now, it's interesting here that the language chosen when it talks about how Athaliah heard is the nation, the people, because it's emphasizing that the people were not in support of Athaliah, but they were in support of the new king, Yoash. Apparently, this murderous queen, who came to power in such an awful way, was not exactly very well loved by the people. And one would imagine the kind of person who comes to power in such a way was probably not the most beloved leader and not the most benevolent leader you can imagine, because the people here clearly wanted to reestablish the Davidic dynasty, the legitimate Davidic dynasty, and Athaliah's coming to usurp that crown was not well received by the people. That's why when it talks about how Athaliah heard, it emphasizes the people. Vatavo el ha'am, she came to the people, Beis Adonai, to the house of God. I'm going to stop here for the first half of chapter 11. We're going to learn about the encounter between Athaliah and the newly appointed king's supporters as we study the next podcast together. Thank you so much for studying this together with me today. Looking forward to studying the rest of chapter 11, the rest of the book of Kings. Have a wonderful day.